Hello, and welcome to Once Enslaved, Once Slaveholder, Forging a Forever Family Bond. This is part one of a two-part series. Please remember to print your syllabus and complete the Slaveholder assessment form prior to the class.
This is a story about discovering slaveholders and enslaved people within your family.
This is a story about our pilgrimage through more than 400 years of American history and our DNA linkage.
This is a story about building trust and friendship.
And this is a story about forging a forever family bond.
As we share our journey, we'll discuss several research tools used to validate our common ancestry. We'll explore successful techniques for navigating the psychological and emotional terrain of slavery and slaveholders within the family.
And most importantly, we will share analysis tools to problem solve and eliminate obstacles, along with our 6 vital lessons learned for the navigation through this journey. I am Beverly, a descendant of mulatto slave Sylvia Lewellens from Holly Springs, Mississippi.
I am Rhonda, a descendant of slaveholders Judge Jesse Lewellen and William C. Lewellen of Holly Springs and Ripley, Mississippi. Both of us have extensive background in family history research, and yes, we are cousins. We invite you to refer to our full biographies and contact information for more details.
So let's have some fun. Everyone loves a riddle. Can you solve this riddle before the music ends? Which one of these things is not like the other? And if you're watching as a group, you may want to stop the tape and discuss your answers.
One of these things is not like the others. One of these things doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other by the time I finish this song?
For those who chose the church building, you are correct. Every other image in this collage is alike because each of them are Lewellens, related by DNA. Some descendants of once enslaved and once slaveholder Lewellens, but all Llewellyn cousins. The shack is the slave quarters owned by Judge Jesse Lewellen of Holly Springs, Mississippi. The man sitting in the group picture is slave Conley Llewellyn, related to W.C. and Judge Jesse Lewellen.
The Llewellyn story begins in the early 1700s with Welsh settlers, my 4 times great-grandfather, Reverend Jesse Lewellen, who raised 10 children. Many of them were slaveholders. Our story will focus on just 2 of his sons, Judge Jesse Lewellen and William C. Lewellen. Utilizing the 1860 Mississippi slave schedule, we can verify the approximate age, sex, and racial status of 15 slaves owned by Judge Jesse Lewellen. Through wills and probate records, a bill of sale, and a Supreme Court battle of Stephen Llewellyn's estate, we're able to identify the names and family groups of 32 Negro slaves. Some were later auctioned in Holly Springs in 1854. Sylvia Lewellen, a mulatto slave, is my cousin Beverly's 3 times great-grandmother. Our connection is verified by an ancestry DNA test, oral history, slave schedules, and this bill of sale. Together, these documents help narrate our common Llewellyn lineage. Recently, I came across a Civil War journal entry providing first-hand account of Judge Jesse Llewellyn's Civil War capture and the actual moment his Negro slaves were freed, September 10th, 1863. Yankees were in town early this morning, carried off several Negroes, and also Judge Jesse Lewellen. Through the Freedmen's Contraband Camp records, freed mulatto slave Sylvia Lewellen and her 2 children spent at least 9 months in a contraband camp. Through those daily records, we find S. Llewellyn and others obtaining food, protection, and education, which was the purpose of these Union camps. The Freedmen Records, released by FamilySearch, is an absolute treasure trove of slave freedom records, including the names of slaveholders, their plantations, educational records for the once enslaved, and even grievances between slaveholders and slaves, as well as the property granted to newly freed men and women. As we carefully research and validate our ancestors' genealogical story, supported by DNA, Beverly and I confirm our relationship as fourth to fifth cousins through the William C. and Judge Jesse Llewellyn lineage. There's actually a second Llewellyn slave connection weaved into our story, that of Conley Llewellyn, a mulatto slave just like Sylvia. Here is another key document which ties the white slaveholder Llewellyns to their slaves. This is the marriage bond of Conley Llewellyn, signed and bonded by Samuel Llewellyn, the son of slave owner William C. Llewellyn. Notice Samuel paid $200. This equates to $4,200 today. Why would he do that for a former slave? What on earth is in it for Samuel? That is a question we'll probably never find the answer, but it certainly gives insight into the relationship of these two Llewellyn families.
Our story is not that uncommon. The probability of your family story being similar to ours is likely or highly probable. In fact, most African Americans are approximately 10 to 15% European, a clear mixture of American enslaved and slaveholders. To explore this theory further, turn to your Slaveholder Assessment Tool, Part 1. What was your score? Were you surprised by that score? Did the tool help validate any suspicions or belief? If you score between 1 to 24, you're least likely to have indicated slaveholders within your family. But scoring anywhere between 25 and 75 says that there's a high probability that slaveholders may exist in your family. Unfortunately, with information and records from Ancestry, FamilySearch, the Freedmen's Bureau, local genealogy groups, and DNA technology help validate and provide clues into your ancestors' occupation and the role they may have played during the slave era. For those of you who are surprised by the high probability of an ancestral slaveholder, let's set the expectations and explore our country's history and its relationship with the institution of slavery and its slaveholders. Indentured servants and slaves have been an American practice since the early 1600s. The arrival of 20 African slaves to the British colony of Virginia marked the beginning of 2.5 centuries of slavery in North America. This is commonly known as the 1619 Project, and you can refer to your syllabus for more information about that. Slavery was legal in all 13 colonies, and most northern states tolerated slavery until the early 1800s. Also, 49% of our founding fathers owned slaves. So if you're related to George Washington or Ben Franklin, you have a slaveholder within your lineage. If your ancestors grew cotton, grain, and textile products grown in southern regions, free labor was necessary. Additionally, Native Americans, along with many freed Black farmers, were slaveholders. The reality of American history taught in our schools selectively overlooks the harsh realities of how this nation was built and the contributions of others. For example, the majestic history of the stories of Native American people are often summarized by John Wayne or cowboy versus Indian battles. This omits the fact that Native Americans were the first original landowners of this nation. And during the 1830s, nearly 125,000 Native Americans lived on millions of acres of land. By the end of that decade, those tribes were forcibly removed to enable farmers to settle and cultivate land once owned by the Native Americans. This difficult and sometimes deadly journey is known as the Trail of Tears. And again, consult your syllabus to find out more information about this. Our school curriculum is neglectful or even silent about the 12 million Africans stolen from their homelands and exported to the America as free labor. The reality of American history has been and always will be a natural intersection of different people, cultures, and practices. This is the true America.
As part of the Homestead Acts beginning in the early 1800s, the Llewellyn family left North Carolina and purchased land in Tennessee and then Mississippi. The booming cotton and textile industry may have been a factor. Through a not so well-known website, historygeo.com, you can recover the original land deeds and land parcel information of your ancestors. Here is an example of land purchased by William C. Llewellyn in 1843. His purchase of 2 parcels of land, each 160 acres, may be a clue for our slaveholder assessment tool that William C. most likely required additional free labor to cultivate his newly acquired property. Another slaveholder clue. Another key tool is tax rolls. When used in conjunction with these original land deeds, the family narrative comes to life. For example, after his death in 1856, we find that William C.'s widow, Sarah, continued to own the lands and paid taxes. Land deeds can also be found in county courthouses. These help identify land, farms, or even plantations within your lineage. Again, possible clues to identify slaveholders within your family.
So let's visit part 2 of the Slaveholder Assessment Tool and capture your reactions and emotions. Undoubtedly, some of you may have been surprised, and for some, it may have validated what you already knew or suspected. Was slavery or slaveholders ever discussed in your family? What emotions were evoked when discussing or scoring this assessment? And particularly, if you scored a high probability of slaveholders within your families, share your thoughts, emotions, and insights now. The typical non-African American slaveholder reaction ranges from disappointment, curiosity, or anger. Often this is accompanied with judgment or blaming those ancestors who participated as slaveholders. This is common, especially if this topic has never been breached within your family. Like many wounds, emotions, hardships, and hidden discoveries, finding slaveholders within your family may be traumatic. And finding out that they may have owned scores of slaves or functioned as merchants who navigated or built the slave ships carrying human cargo across the Atlantic can be daunting. That realization can be traumatic or disturbing for some. It can trigger a wide range of emotions, even trauma.
We'd like to share a quote from actor Ben Affleck when he discovered slaveholders within his family. This discovery happened while filming an episode of Finding Your Roots featuring Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. I didn't want any television show about my family to include a guy who owned slaves. I was embarrassed. The very thought left a bad taste in my mouth. His reaction may be similar to yours. Perhaps the same emotions? What words might you have in common? Our hope is that you do not assign motive or judgment along with this tragic discovery. Holding ourselves or others accountable for the social and business norms of our ancestors is counterproductive. But rather get involved and proactively seek to uncover more information about your ancestors' role and definitely put it into the context of the times. Better yet, find and share documentation which may help others identify their lineage.
So the question is, with raw emotions and trauma at bay, why continue researching? Well, being proactive and assisting the enslaved descendants discover records not only help them identify and trace their lineage, but can fill a void that has existed since the beginning of slavery. There are no Ellis Island records or formal documentations that captures the slaves' 2-month journey. The cargo manifest only captures approximate age, color, gender, and potential profit margin.
So why take that risk? Well, researching and taking that risk can potentially fill someone's ancestral void, resulting in a life-altering discovery. This is a gift. Most African Americans find it difficult, if not impossible, to trace their roots to a country of origin, tribe, or lost family members. It's a risk worth taking. Like the two of us, your involvement has the potential to forge a deep family bond. And we took that risk. By exploring family history and generating online family trees, Dudley Llewellyn reached out on Ancestry's forum. Dudley is the great-grandson of mulatto slave Conley Llewellyn, the man pictured in the earlier riddle. In 2019, Dudley's post caught my attention for 2 reasons. One, his name was spelled the exact same as my family line, which has lots of variations. Second, his family migrated from North Carolina to Tennessee to North Mississippi. That was the same migration pattern that mine took. But I was really caught off guard when I noticed his profile picture and saw that he was African American. I answered his post, and here we began several exchanges through emails and phone calls.
And yes, I also took the risk. After their encounters and a series of emails and phone calls, Dudley, Rhonda, and I discovered our common DNA link to Judge Jesse and William C. Llewellyn. We took the risk, and it resulted in 3 cousins meeting in Holly Springs, Mississippi, and a 10-day journey that led to monumental discoveries and friendship. Well, this ends part 1 of this session. And in part 2, we'll share our 6 lessons learned, our problem solving and analysis tools, techniques used to identify and remove obstacles, and foster a pathway to healing. Thank you for watching our presentation, and for more great content, check out the Rootstech page.